our journey from zero to fully functional live streaming, we started by getting OBS installed on our Mac or PC computer. We then learned to improve our sound with some simple additions. We learned how to add one or more cameras to our configuration, and then enhance that with full 4K capability. We learned how to use Stream Deck to control our live stream. And now we're going to look at the Blackmagic Design ATEM Mini Pro to learn how to control multiple HDMI sources to really expand our capability in live streaming. Hello, and welcome to Part 6 of Happy Place Home Studios series on live streaming from scratch. In Part 6, we're going to talk about how you can extend your capabilities in your live stream with the Blackmagic Design ATEM Mini Pro. The ATEM Mini Pro is another great Blackmagic device, and it's an entire series of products that starts with the ATEM Mini, has the ATEM Mini Pro. They've got the rack-mounted models and a new, even more extended version of the Mini Pro with many more HDMI channels. This is really a terrific device. It's a great part of my live stream stack. Blackmagic just does a great job with this type of thing. And let me tell you a little bit about what the Mini Pro can actually do for you. So number one, it's a great way to take the load off of your USB controllers on your computer, especially if you're using something like a Mac laptop like I'm using. You don't have that many USB ports, and I really overload mine with what I do with my live streaming. So it's great to be able to offload a number of HDMI devices, cameras, and other computers through an HDMI feed to the ATEM Mini Pro, because that uses only one USB port on my computer. And then I have still all the control, all the capability that I would want. So that's a really big thing that it does for me in my live stream. But another thing that it does is it normalizes all the signals from your different cameras. Your cameras may be different cameras. They may be set at different resolutions. But the ATEM just handles all that. And to your OBS, when you're doing your live stream, they all pretty much look the same. Now, obviously, if the resolutions are different, the images may be a little bit different, but you don't have to worry about that. You let the ATEM Mini Pro worry about that. Another thing that it does is it really extends your capability even beyond what this series covers, which is doing all this with OBS. You can actually do standalone live streams just with the ATEM Mini Pro device, which can be great for a mobile stream or another configuration that you might run into that you need. It's built to handle YouTube, Facebook, and other services, and you can even record just with the ATEM Mini Pro onto a micro hard drive, and it just gives you another way to produce the information that you want to produce. Okay, I'd like to walk you through a little bit of what we're actually going to cover in this session. Number one is I'll give you a brief introduction to the ATEM Mini Pro. I'll show you how to configure and use it with OBS, and then show you some real live examples of how you're going to use it in your live stream. Now, I'm not going to get super technical with the ATEM Mini Pro. I'll definitely give you enough information to get started and get moving forward. But I'm also linking some really good videos that have been produced out there on the ATEM Mini Pro so that you have more information that you can work with. All right, so the first thing let's just do a quick walkthrough of what I've set up here to show you this, because this is not a live stream, but I kind of have set myself up to record and produce it as if it was a live stream, so that you can see the flexibility that you have when you have whatever your setup is, and then add the ATEM Mini Pro and all the extra capability that it gives you. So I actually have like 4 or 5 cameras hooked up right now to my system, as well as another Mac via HDMI for the screenshots. So let's just walk through that real quickly. So first of all, I have a 4K camera that you're looking at me right now on, and that is going through a cam link. So that's actually not going through the ATEM Mini Pro, because one thing you need to know about the Mini Pro is it will not do 4K, at least the model that I have will not. So I still want my 4K camera. I'm putting that through the CamLink and through a separate port. Now another thing that I have here is my NDI iPhone, which I've got pointed at my actual live Mini Pro here. So as we walk through that, you can see what's going on there. And then what I've got hooked up through the ATEM Mini Pro is not only the computer with the screenshot that I've already shown you, but also another camera over here, my Blackmagic Design camera. And on the other side is a camera that I never set up and use because it's a really bad shot, you know, behind the scenes here. But just to make the point that, yeah, you can have lots of cameras hooked up at the same time. Now for this configuration, I'm actually only using 3 of the 4 input ports on the ATEM Mini Pro, so I could have yet another camera or another HDMI device hooked up if I needed to. But I think we're making the point. This really extends your capability to have more cameras plugged in. If I had a guest in the next room or whatever, I wanted a couple of cameras there, I could have that. And it really is a terrific extension of your capability. Let's do a quick overview of the layout of the ATEM Mini Pro. And then I'll show you in the real life example how I'm using this for this particular video. The layout of the ATEM Mini Pro is really very straightforward. On the left-hand side, you've got your 4 banks of controls for 4 different HDMI inputs. And the simple control is which one is active. And you can see that the first or the second one there is active because it's red. So I can switch very easily between whatever the camera or HDMI input is on the device just by pressing those buttons. And then above that, you've got some controls that are related to audio because you can bring the audio in from any source, camera or other HDMI feed, channel by channel, and that will feed directly into your OBS as well. So you can turn on audio for one of the devices with the on button, and then you can control the volume for those devices here. There's a couple of other controls there that I'll cover a little bit later. At the top right, the top left of the device up here, you've also got microphone channel controls, mic 1 and mic 2, for separate microphone inputs into the ATEM device itself. And then you've got individual control of whether those devices are on. Now, there's also an AFV capability, which is audio follows video. And if you turn that on one or more channels, then when you select that device, that camera or other HDMI input, you'll automatically be getting the audio from that device. And I will show you an example of that. Now, on the right-hand side are quite a few controls that we'll also cover. One that I'll cover right away is transitions. So right now, and I'll show you this when we go to that section, I've just got simple cut transitions, but you can also do fades and other interesting things with the transitions. You've got very simple controls for those things there as well. So again, I'll give you more information on that. And then we'll cover some more of the controls just a little bit later. Now, I've put this into a picture-in-picture that I'll show you right now. So as we go through and talk about how I'm switching between the cameras and the other devices, you'll be able to see that in the picture-in-picture. So let's go ahead and start that right now. So I mentioned that I've got the simple cut transformations going on. So when I go to this camera over here, it just cuts. I'll go back to the image of the ATEM Mini Pro, and then over here, it's just cutting. But let's go ahead and choose the fade transitions, and then you'll see that as I move over, I'm getting an actual fade. And I have control of that fade as well, by the way. I can go from half a second to 2 seconds of fade. So I'm at half a second right now. Let's go to the 2 seconds, and you'll see how that works. So it just takes a lot longer to do the fade in and the fade out. And there are then other fade transformations you can do as well. Okay, I'd like to give you an example of how the audio follows video works. Now, I'm currently, what's selected in OBS is the NDI source. So that's not going to, changing the switches on the ATM right now is not going to affect anything because I'm not talking to that channel from OBS. I'm not talking to that scene, if you will. All right, so the two cameras that have audio capability are on number 1 and number 3. So as I switch back and forth between those, I'm setting this up so that the audio will follow my video selection. So currently, as you can see, my audio is off. And I could just turn it on, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to hit the AFV button on that channel 1, and then sneak over here and hit it on channel 3 as well, so that those two cameras are now in audio follows video mode. So as I'm going to go ahead and select that first camera there and switch over. There we are. So I've also turned off my main audio mic, which is not part of the cameras at all, but now I'm on this camera's audio. And when I switch to the other camera, I'll be on this camera's audio, and I've kind of left them pretty distinctly different so that you can tell that I'm switching. So no matter how many times I switch, it's going to go back and forth for audio as well as for video. Now, while we're on the subject, we can talk about volume control as well. Each volume has volume control, each channel, I should say, has volume control up and down. So we'll adjust them live and in real time as we go back to the cameras again. All right, this camera needs to go up a bit, so I will in real time go ahead and up the volume on this channel. I can't actually hear it as I do this, so I could be overloading it. And I think that the other camera was a little too loud. So we'll come over here, and I will hit the down volume to try to make that adjustment here. And you can judge the results for yourself. Obviously, this is something that you really work out before you get into your live stream. Now, in my live streams, I do use multiple cameras, but I rarely switch the audio between the cameras. But your needs may be completely different, and many people use the audio from their cameras and switch between the cameras and the audio on those cameras very frequently. So it's good to know how to do that. All right, let's talk for just a second about connections to the ATEM Mini Pro. All right, this is a top view, but you can still see the many things that are connected in the back here. You have two microphone connectors on the left rear of the device, and those are good microphone connections, and you control those microphone connections with this top block of controls here. You then have 4 HDMI inputs, and the 4 HDMI inputs are 1, 2, 3, 4 left to right, and they correspond directly with the 4 control blocks here. You then have an HDMI out port, followed by a USB-C controller port, and that allows you not only to connect to a computer. That is how I have my ATEM Mini Pro connected to my MacBook Pro, and am receiving the signals there, but also this can be connected to a hard drive, a micro hard drive, and with that you can not only load media from the hard drive, such as images that you might want to display with these controls here, but also you can record directly to that hard drive with the record controls on the ATEM Mini Pro. You then have an Ethernet port, which allows you to connect to the internet directly, and that is used for updating the ATEM Mini Pro, as well as streaming directly from the Mini Pro to YouTube or Facebook. You do not have to have a computer to do that. However, Obviously, our focus here is using this with OBS. And then finally is the power jack for the ATEM Mini Pro. And that is a very high quality, as with most Blackmagic design. This is really industrial design for in-studio use. My one complaint about the ATEM Mini Pro is that it does not have an on-off switch. And that is a real bothersome thing to me. So you literally have to unplug and plug in the ATEM Mini Pro every time you use it. Here's the actual image of the rear of the ATEM Mini Pro. So again, as you can see now from the right, because we're looking at the rear head on, you got the 2 microphone ports, the 4 HDMI ports, the HDMI out. It says USB out, but it has a USB-C connector. And then you've got your Ethernet and your power port. In my live streaming setup, I used my ATEM Mini Pro and my Stream Deck together. We covered Stream Deck in our last video in this series. So when you need that kind of access to both of them, you'll just have to kind of work out how exactly you're going to set up the ATEM Mini Pro and the Stream Deck so that you can get to both of them and seamlessly work with the controls to control your live stream. Okay, let's talk about how we physically connect and then configure the ATEM Mini Pro for use with your Macintosh and OBS software. All right, as you recall, we talked about the USB port that's on the back of the unit, and that is what we're going to use to connect to our Macintosh. Now on my system, I have a MacBook Pro. It has only USB-C ports. That makes life easy. I just have a simple USB-C to USB-C cable that connects the two devices. Now, if you do not have USB-C ports on your Mac, you've got USB 2 or USB 3, for example, you need to get an adapter, either a cable that has USB-C on one end and USB 2 or 3 on the other, or an adapter for one end of your cable. Fairly straightforward. I believe that it is possible to configure through the Ethernet port as well. However, I have not done so. So the way that I know that's most straightforward is configure it to your USB-C port. Then we need to configure OBS to work with the ATEM Mini Pro. And I have talked before about the difficulty of actually just showing something that you're doing in OBS using OBS. You get that little effect of, mirror into forever type stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the preview mode off so that we don't have to deal with that. Okay, within my little multi-purpose Swiss Army knife scene within OBS, I have turned the preview mode off, so we're not seeing the mirror into forever. And now I want to create a source for the ATEM Mini Pro. You'll notice I already have one, but I want to show you the creation process. I'm just going to simply create another one. Okay, so we're going to hit the plus down here to add another source. And we're going to add a video capture device. That's what the Blackmagic driver is configured as. So we will add one called ATEM Mini for Video. There we go. And I put things in all caps that I know I want to get rid of later. Click OK. All right. The configuration of this is very easy because Blackmagic has made it very easy. So the drop down, the long big drop down field there, under device you want to simply choose Blackmagic Design. It instantly shows whatever is coming in from the ATEM Mini Pro, which happens to be the picture of the back of the ATEM Mini Pro, which I was just using. So whatever is configured or not configured is going to show. If nothing's configured, you'll just see a black screen. You can use the preset, or you can turn that off and use the highest resolution, which is 1920 by 1080, which is what I do, or whatever resolution that you choose to use. Remember that any source will be normalized in the ATEM Mini Pro, so you can use any resolution at the same time with different cameras and it will automatically configure. And then you can use simple SPS values, and I just usually use 30 for that, and that's all there is to the configuration. So we'll click OK. And we don't have our preview mode turned on, so we're not going to be seeing that in OBS, but you are in fact going to be able to see it. I'll go ahead and turn it on here real quick, even though we have the bad effect, so that you can see, yep, there it is. Now, as usual, you'll want to size that, and so I'll just use the transform command here to resize that to fit the screen, which is very handy. And zooming in keeps us all from getting ill looking at the effect back there. So I'll just choose fit to screen, and there you go. So that's how easy it is to configure the Blackmagic Design ATEM Mini Pro for use with OBS. Now, that also, the driver also encapsulates the audio capabilities and all the other capabilities of the ATEM Mini Pro. So connecting and configuring the Mini Pro to work with your Mac or your PC is very straightforward, very simple, and works really well. All right, next let's talk about connecting cameras and other devices to the back of the ATEM Mini Pro through the HDMI. Obviously, on the Mini Pro side, it's pretty straightforward. It's HDMI. But how do you get there from your various different cameras? Well, I'll show you a couple of configurations that are typical that I have in my studio. So I use Sony cameras. FDR AX53, I think, is this one. And they unfortunately have a couple of little weirdnesses about the way you connect to the camera. One is that the display door must be open in order for you to use the connector. Then you've got this additional little port right down here. That's got to be open. And then they've got a special cable that goes from the mini DVI on one end and then USB on the other. And that's really pretty cool. If you're, I could plug this camera right straight into the ATEM Mini Pro, except for this cable is only about this long, so that would have to be that close. But leaving that aside, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in the mini DVI, and that's ready to go. Then I have purchased a variety of different extension cables, and this extension cable is currently plugged in to the back of the ATEM Mini Pro. So I will connect it. It's an extender, so it has a female end, and I'll connect it. There we go. So now that is in fact connected. And whatever this thing is looking at, when I switch us over to the ATEM Mini Pro and to that camera port, there we go. So very nice. So here's a little forever for you. All right, so that's how that works for that particular camera. Other cameras, of course, have other connections, and my Blackmagic camera actually has a full-size HDMI port plug in it, so that works great. I just need HDMI to HDMI for that one. When it comes to connecting to a computer, that also can be very straightforward, although my PC actually has an HDMI port. That works great. But my iMac 2015 model, I have to go out one of the special adapter ports. It's not HDMI, so I needed an adapter for that. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to show you one other thing about this, since this is a Macintosh-oriented series of videos, but that also should apply to folks with a PC. Let me switch over. There we go, and let's look at what's on the computer. Okay, so when you plug in to the computer, you may have to use this HDMI or its screen configuration. So I'm going to just go into System Preferences and the displays. There we go. And you'll notice that what pops up here is you've got the Retina, the built-in Retina display, but you've also got a configuration for what they call the BMD HDMI. So HDMI has that intelligent capability to automatically recognize when it's plugged into something that it can talk to, and your Mac will automatically recognize that and pull up this HDMI configuration so that you do have some parameters that you can set up here. I have a Retina 5K display, and I never get that kind of resolution through the HDMI interface, and you probably noticed that it's a little bit fuzzier than it should be when I record it on video, but it does work well, and it automatically configures, so that's really great. So when it comes to connecting your HDMI devices to the ATEM Mini Pro, the biggest variables are what are you having to jack into, what adapters might you need, and then when it comes to PC to PC, making sure that you're able to configure the resolution the way that you need to. This is some bonus footage that I've done late in the production of this video. I talked about the ability of the ATEM Mini Pro to be a standalone recording or streaming device. And I did not initially intend to show that in the video, but I realized that another production that I'm working on for Happy Place Home Studio might dovetail here, because as you can tell, I'm in a different place than I normally am in my studio. I am doing a project featuring this little beauty. This is a TEAC reel-to-reel recorder that was made in 1970, and it used to belong to my uncle, and I got it about 25 years ago, and I'm doing a project related to both the refurbishment of this unit and also my uncle's music. But the point is that I can't do this in my main studio because this unit is just too big. I don't have room in the studio, so I'm using another place in the house. You probably hear some street noise and that kind of thing to do this production, and I realized how great it would be to use the ATEM Mini Pro standalone, because I thought I was going to have to move a whole lot of production rig out here to do this, and now I'm just doing it with the ATEM Mini Pro. And I'm going to have to use my iPhone here to show you a little bit of the setup. You can see on the ATEM Mini Pro there's a little green light in the upper right, and that means that the hard disk is hooked up and working and operating. And then you've got record button and stop button up there in the upper right as well. So it's a very simple setup. As you can see, this is a picture of the entire thing, including the hard disk. And then I've got a couple of the cameras. Probably could use a third camera right now. I wouldn't be having to use the iPhone if I had a third camera. I believe there's a way I could hook the iPhone in to the ATEM Mini Pro. I just don't have the correct adapters right now. So right now the setup is that I've got this camera that I'm working with, and then this camera, which is on the TEAC, and I'll probably have that third camera as I mentioned. This whole setup took me only about 15 minutes, and I'd never done it before, so that was cool. One aspect of that, though, was that this Samsung T7 mini hard disk was already pre-formatted with a file format that the ATEM Mini Pro was happy with, so I plugged it in, and a little green light came on, boom, off and running. There are also some very good videos on YouTube about this aspect of the ATEM Mini Pro, and I watched a few minutes of one of them to get some really helpful information. So just for the sake of completeness, this is one aspect that I think you'll find very, very useful about the ATEM Mini Pro, is its ability to do a standalone recording or a standalone stream, again, working with YouTube or Facebook. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our Live Streaming from Scratch series. As always, please leave any feedback in the comments section. Join us and continue your march towards a great live streaming system for episode 7, in which we'll talk about lighting. We'll see you next time. By your color, by your